talk about the second assignment. Right, so this second assignment, the focus will be on the gathering of requirements and documenting requirements. We're pretty much at the very beginning of the project, and we are what it's called the discovery phase, the requirements discovery phase, right? So we're going to give you a project statement, right? That is going to be a first go on what the clients think they want, right? A lot of it in there will be very vague. Will be a lot of the information that's going to be provided there is going to be irrelevant, but some of them will be very relevant, right? It'll be very specific. Oftentimes, clients don't quite know exactly what they need or what they want, and it's our job to help them navigate that, right? They'll often think that certain things are very, very easy and they're actually impossible, whereas they'll think that something is very, very hard, but it's actually very trivial to implement. Okay, so oftentimes they won't say something in our discussions, in the brainstorming, in our interviews, because they already have a mindset, or they might already have some subjective biases that precludes them from saying certain things, right? Or they might say things that they think it's relevant, and they'll go on and on and on explaining certain things are totally irrelevant to the project, okay? Whereas they'll skip over a lot of the details that are actually very relevant, but they just thought it wasn't important to mention, okay? That is very, very common, okay? And so bridging and trying to identify what is actually important, what we're actually going to be building, is part of what software engineering is all about, right? And that first part of identifying the requirements is very, very hard, okay? So much so that Agile point on this is that it's totally futile trying to identify the requirements all a priori, right? That we should abandon the waterfall take on this, that we should try to identify all the requirements at the beginning as much as we can, and not start implementation at all until we have all the requirements all set in stone, right? Before we have to all agree what it is that we're building, and then start building. And whereas Agile says, yes, you should focus perhaps on the core functionality or some of the core requirements, you know, but don't linger too much. Instead, once you get started implementing some of these, a lot of new things are going to be learned that are going to force you to validate or rethink some of the requirements that you would have been generated otherwise. Okay, so this first part here will give you the project statement where as you'll see in a minute, a lot of the content there is irrelevant. Right, there'll be some fluff at the beginning that might be somewhat markety. That's saying something about that we want our website to be visually pleasing or informative or easy and intuitive. These are very vague terms that oftentimes there is no objective way of measuring some of these things. Right, so it's we want to maximize, or we want to build member loyalty, right? Or leverage human capital. So a lot of this is somewhat very fluff. That from a business point of view or some visionary might be relevant, but it's very hard to translate this to some functional requirements that we actually are going to represent it in some link or some button or some window or some screen that we might want to build. Some other information is actually going to be fairly useful, right? It's going to go into some more details on what certain tools we might need for implementing our application. So what the assignment for this week is to read through this document, right, and then come up with an SRS, a system requirements specification. Right. So this system requirement specification is a document that we're giving you. It's a template, and it's empty. And throughout the semester, we're going to come back to this document and fill in some of some of these empty areas, right, as we progress through the semester. So this week, we're only going to focus just on a subset of the sections here, all right? And even within those sections, we're not going to spend too much time on any one of those sections, right? We're only going to scratch the surface on what we would actually write in this document, right? But we're just going to want to give you a feeling of what it would be like to maintain, to create, to update, to own one of these documents. Right? Oftentimes you would be doing this in tandem with a systems engineer, with a business analyst, right, or some project manager that is the owner of these documents, right? And oftentimes you would be the consumer of these documents, right? You would be participating in the creation, but someone else would actually own it, right? And you would be the recipient of the result of this document, right? That would document what needs to be built. Yes? All right. So this week we're gonna spend some time getting started with a document. You're going to be preparing it. You're going to be the owner for this time around. You're going to keep track of a version control of when did you modify what, right? Who did it? Who modified whatever? And this is very much should be treated as a commit, right? In a source repo, source control. Right? If you make any modifications to this document, it should be noted what is it that you changed, who did it, when, why, and whatnot. Okay. So reading through the project statement, you will fill out this SRS document. Yes? Again, only a very small subset of this. And we will come back to this over the course of the entire semester, updating things. We will be deliberately modifying requirements, things that are maybe a third of the way to being implemented, and we will suddenly change our mind and ask you to change something. Maybe add a column, or something that was supposed to be a string is now an integer, or something that used to be a date is now something else, right? And we'll ask you to make some changes to this, and you will have to reflect a lot of those changes in these documents. Okay. There's a lot of bracketed information in here, giving you some hints on what it is that you need to be providing. Again, you're not going to be filling out the entire document this time around, but whatever portion you do edit or please remove the bracketed hints in there. Yes. All right. So let's talk about what it is that we are actually building. So we're going to be building an application that is going to allow service providers and service clients to come together, to have a marketplace, right? Very much like maybe Angie's List or these websites where plumbers and electricians and folks offer their personal services. Right, and we can search for them. So I need somebody to come and clean my house, or I need a plumber, or I need an electrician. I would be able to come to this website, yes, and search, answer certain criteria, and then get a list of folks who could come and help me out with a particular service. Yes, and there'll be many different types of services. Right, there will be services for like cleaning services. There'll be folks that can work on lawn services outside of the house. There'll be folks, again, plumbers and electricians. And each one of these types of services or categories, different categories, will have different questions that we might need to answer when we're searching for a plumber or we're searching for somebody to clean our house. Yes? If we're searching for somebody to clean our house, probably we'll have to ask, that we'll be asked certain things such as, well, how big a house do you have, and how many rooms? Do you have pets? Is it just the floors, or you need the windows as well? Yes. So these answers, the answers that we answer to these questions, will be used to match our needs with whatever provider best matches our needs. Yes. If we instead need an electrician or a plumber, we might be asked different questions. Yes. We might be asked, do you need plumbing for the kitchen or the bathroom, or do you also need heating or air conditioning or things like that. So depending on the service, we'll have different questions. Yes, so that we can be better matched with the service provider and the service client. Make sense? Right. So the system is going to need some way to search. The client is going to need some way to browse through different services that are available. Be able to search by filling out these search criteria. They're going to be able to navigate to their service provider's presence in the application. Maybe read through the provider's reviews. Other folks who have used this provider before. Maybe they will have to fill out maybe a questionnaire, right? Or also see if they have gone through some criminal background check. Whether they how many employees do they have? So these providers will have certain questions that they will have answered, just like we answer questions. They will have answered certain questions that might help us choose one provider versus another provider, right? One plumber or another plumber. Yes? Okay. Now, all of this. So there's a front end. There's a front end that end users are using, right? That they can search, they can query, they can identify, they can and maybe set up an agreement with a particular provider. Yes, but there's also some requirements on the back end, right? We're going to need system administrators to be able to modify certain aspects. Yes, for instance, all those questions that we need to answer about plumbers or about cleaners, all those questions need to be maintainable. Some system administrators are going to have to enter all those questions. Yes? So they're going to have to be able to maintain those questions. Add a question. What kind of questions do we need for the plumbers? What kind of questions do we need for the electricians? What kind of questions do we need for somebody who's walking with my dog? Right? And so we'll need some back-end tools for the system administrators, for administration personnel to be able to maintain all this content. Yes? Right, so already we have identified a few folks who are going to be using this. The clients, right, the service providers, and the system administrators. These are three human beings who are going to be using the application. We typically refer to these human beings as actors, right? The actors or the audience who's going to be using our application. Now, those are the human actors. There might be non-human actors. Right, the website is a non-human actor that also responds and interacts with you, right, and takes a different takes different actions depending on certain criteria. So you'll be asked as part of the assignment to identify these actors, right, and to describe them. So one of the questions here is identify at least two human actors and one non-human actor. We already talked about this. We already mentioned a couple, right? This asks you to try to describe their goals. What are they trying to achieve, right? So that's one of the first part of software engineering is identifying who's the audience, who's going to be using my application, right? We would try to identify what are they trying to achieve, right? What are their goals, and what can we do to implement something that fulfills their goals, right? That they will use our application and say, yes, I found the application that allows me to fulfill my goals. So that first part in section 3.1, you're asked to list and describe those actors. Another important aspect is that you'll be asked to describe use cases. So use cases is a formal documentation of the goals that human users are trying to achieve, and the steps that they would follow, right, using your application. What are the steps that they would follow to achieve those goals? Okay, it might be that if I'm looking for we already talked about a use case, right? I'm a client and I need somebody to clean my house, and so that's my goal. I need a service provider. So how do I achieve the fact that I need to find somebody to fulfill my service, right? Well, I need to log in, perhaps navigate through all the services, perhaps fill out a questionnaire specific to that service. I'll be giving a list of potential candidates who fulfill that criteria. I will navigate to one of those service providers. I will read through their review, right? And then I'll enter into an agreement with them. Yes? So all those are the steps that will fulfill the goal that I wanted to fulfill of finding somebody for particular service. Make sense? So that's one use case. There's many use cases. There could be hundreds of use cases that your application could provide. All right? Some use cases are fairly complex. Some of them are more mundane. So some of them are just logging in, right? Or creating an account. That's also a mundane type of use case, right? That might entail only 3 or 4 steps. Some of them might entail 10 or 20 steps. Yes? Now these use cases, they have a particular format. Each organization that follows of any maturity will have a template to fill out these use cases. We have one in the SRS template that we gave you. In the SRS template, down below, you're asked to create use cases, right? You'll be asked to enumerate all your use cases and provide a brief description and the title. And we give you 3 use cases. We're asking you to implement these 3 use cases. In a real environment, you would have hundreds of use cases. Okay, we're asking you to work on these 3. One of them is an end user use case, meaning a use case that a real user of your application from a client would be using, either a service client or service provider. Those are the end users. One of them is service client searches for a service provider, which we just described. Yes. The other 2 are interfacing requirements. This is something that an administrator personnel might need. Okay, they're going to have to be able to update the user profile of a user. Okay. Maybe they have to change somebody's password. Maybe they have to change somebody's role. Maybe they have to change something about their particular user account. Yes. So this would be a use case that is interfacing, be used by a system administrator or a administration personnel. The other one is administering, being able to add questions to a particular service type. Right. This was what I mentioned earlier. Right. If you're going to clean my house, one of the questions that the client might need to answer is, how big is the house? How many rooms? And whatnot? Yes. So somebody has to maintain those questions, right? And typically there will be some system administrator who maintains those questions, right? So this one asks you to create a tool that allows you to maintain these questions, add questions, remove questions, edit questions, right? Look at the answers, okay? Right. So this one asks you to create that particular use case. So one of the use cases is out facing, and 2 of them are interfacing. Okay, use cases. For each one, you're asked to create a unique identifier, provide a title. I already gave you a title. So these are certainly good titles. Although you might want to change them. Perhaps you might want to paraphrase my titles. You have to identify who the actors are. In this one, the service client is the actor. This is the person who has the goal. Right? In these, the administration personnel are the actors, right, who are using your application. So you have to identify the actors and describe who they are. You need to have paraphrase and describe what are the goals of this particular actor, what they are trying to achieve. Yes? And just in a couple of words, 25 words or less, describe how is it that they're going to achieve this, right? They're going to navigate to this questionnaire, they're going to answer it, and they're going to get a list of potential providers, right? Preconditions is a list of things that must be true, right, before this use case is relevant, right? I need to be logged in, I need to have an account, maybe I have to have PayPal set up already. Maybe I have to have, certain things have to be true before I can go forward, right? If I'm a service provider, maybe I have to have had a background check, right? Maybe I have to have certain insurance. Maybe I have to have certain things that must be true before a particular use case can continue. Make sense? So these are assumptions that this particular use case is dependent on before it can go forward. Then the basic path is the happy path of the algorithm that a user would follow to accomplish their goal. Okay, it's specific but yet vague, right? So it's specific in that it's complete, right? I need to be able to follow all these steps to accomplish my goal, but it's vague in such that it does not tell me how to implement it, right? It's not specific enough to tell me that I need certain buttons, or I need certain tables, or I need certain lists, or that so it's not specific in that way, right? It's algorithmically accurate, right? In that it might tell you have to be able to select a provider, but it won't tell you that you have to click on a button to select that provider. Make sense? So it leaves it open to discussion on how a developer is actually going to implement it. Yes? Right. For that, we'll talk about functional requirements in a minute. Right? Functional requirements. But use cases leave it open to discussion the actual implementation details. So this doesn't say swipe up or click or press. Right? It doesn't say anything about any implementation that would tell you that this is a mobile application or a desktop application. Make sense? All right. So it leaves the implementation details to the functional requirements, which we'll talk in a minute. So also this is the happy path. The happy path is that if everything's okay and in a perfect world, what should happen? What should be the best case scenario? Right? The one shot if everything is working. If something goes wrong, like in the variations, we need to document what things could go wrong, right? Maybe they haven't done yet or maybe they're asking for a product that is no longer there, or by the time I know I showed up in the list, but by the time you selected me, I had already created a contract with somebody else. Right, so these are the edge cases. What are the edge cases of things that could go wrong, or error messages that would appear if something goes wrong? So the variations, you would document that. Postcondition captures what is the state of the application at the end of this use case. Maybe you ordered something and so the product quantity goes down. Right, or you reviewed something and so the rating changes, so this is all the changes that would occur at the end of this use case. Okay, so you're going to fill out 3 of these, right? In here you're going to create 3 sections here: 321, 322, and 333. 321, 322, and 323. Okay, and create unique identifiers for these. Unique identifiers for each one of these use cases, and the titles of those use cases. All right? All right, excellent. All right, so then after having documented these use cases, we're going to try and go a little bit further. Right? The use cases are good for talking about what we need to implement at a very high level, right? And usually these use cases fall from business requirements, right? So the business owners or the business sponsors have a vision of what they want to achieve, perhaps this quarter or this year, right? Of increasing sales or reducing returns or whatever. They might have reducing returns by 50% by the end of the year or something like that, right? And so with that vision of what they want to achieve that particular year, many use cases and user requirements would fall from there. How do we achieve that? You identify, why are people returning our products, right? Why, is it defective? Did they order the wrong thing? What happened? Yes, and so if it's something that we're doing, let's identify where's the confusion? Where are users confused of what they're ordering, right? So that there are no returns later on. How can we make it sure that what they're buying is exactly what they were looking for, right? So a lot of use cases and user requirements are going to fall from the vision or business requirements that the business owners and the sponsors are going to have, right? Where they want to take the company, and same thing. So just like that, like use cases and user requirements fall from business requirements, functional requirements fall from user requirements, right? From these use cases, just like use cases, unlike use cases that don't specify implementation details, functional requirements do. So a use case might say something like, select user from a set of users, right? So select users from a set of users. Notice that it does not tell me that those users are displayed as a list or as a table. It doesn't say, or maybe a drop down, right? Because there's many different ways that we could select a user, right? But it doesn't specify that. It says a set of users. Whereas functional requirements do go into those details, right? In selecting a user, in this context, might be from a drop down. Or in some other context, it might be filling out some input field and it filters all the users as you type. Or it might be from a long list, from a paginated, many pages of users that then you can click a particular user. Make sense? There's different ways of selecting a user from a set of users, right? And functional requirements capture those details, right? That it might be doing one way to implement this use case and this other way to implement this other use case. Make sense? Right? So what this question asks you to do is to look at those use cases that we looked at earlier, right? These three use cases, right? And it's asking you, how would you implement, or what are the functional requirements for each one of these? And here you will be free to imagine what this might look like, because it's nowhere in the requirements in the project statement. The project statement is very vague about that, right? So you as a developer, all right, need to imagine what that might look like. Right? I'll probably need some list where I can see the users. I'll probably need to be able to click on and select that user. I'll probably need to navigate to a page to be able to modify that user's account information. Yes? Right, so that's where it's asking you to come up with functional requirements for each one of the. It's asking you to have at least 3 functional requirements for each use case. So there's 3 use cases. Each one you're going to have 3 functional requirements. So at the end you're going to have 9 functional requirements. Make sense? So 3 for each one of the 3 above. And to document them in section 4.1. Right, so in the SRS, there's a section 4.1 which asks you to document your functional requirements. All right? Then there is the non-functional requirements. Right? So whereas functional requirements represent physical things or graphical things that you can actually see on some screen or some user interface, non-functional requirements are things that are somewhat ethereal, things that you don't see, but they're there, right? Such as quality, right? It usually refers to some quality of service, meaning that when I go there, the pages, the website actually loads, and it loads at least within half a second, right? Or it allows me to have at least 1,000 users simultaneously logged in at the same time, before it crashes. Right? So these are things that I don't see, but I don't want to see. Right? The user should be unaware that all this quality is happening around the application, right? Or such as or for instance, that the application is secure, right? That nobody's going to hack into my personal information. Again, that's transparent to me, but it's obviously needed. So those are non-functional requirements that can be measured. Right, but it cannot be measured with something physical that you can see with your naked eyes, but nevertheless can be measured by looking at the logs, or by looking at network traffic, or by looking at the performance of the system over time. Yes? So those are non-functional requirements, and we'll talk about that a little further, some more in the lecture. So we're asking you in section 4.2 to come up with at least 5 non-functional requirements. And we already mentioned a few, right? And you're welcome to use those. Then project statement is, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be very specific in certain sections, and it's going to be very vague in other sections. Okay, and inevitably there'll be lots and lots of questions that you will need to ask, to decide on whether we're going to implement it this way or that other way. Okay, so we're going to ask you to fill out any assumptions that you make because the document is incomplete or is vague or is contradictory, right? That it doesn't explain certain things, right? So here you're going to document any assumptions that you're going to make. Right? It says, well, nowhere can I find any description about X, Y, Z, so I'm going to make an assumption. Right? I am going to assume this, that, and the other, and you're going to list here at least five assumptions, all right? And you need to argument, why are you assuming this? Is there some hint in the document that is taking you in that direction of assuming this, or maybe from your personal experience or your professional experience, right? Things that you've implemented elsewhere, maybe in co-op or elsewhere, right? That you might bring to bear, some of your experience on making some choices. So make those choices, okay, and document them, what your choice is, and then provide some argumentation of why you chose that. Okay. Another part is that as we're gathering requirements in this discovery phase, typically these discovery phases could go on for days, right? Even weeks or even months, depending how big a project could be. We're going to try and do it in 1 week. So obviously, we only have so much time to play around with some of these concepts, yes? But we're going to be doing this over and over throughout the semester, right? So one of the techniques that is used during the discovery phase of requirements is that folks are flown over from all over the place, depending how big the organization is, and they meet for a couple of days at some hotel where marketing and sales and engineering and everybody who's interested in the project is meeting, all co-located geographically in the same place. Yes, and there's all sorts of brainstorming sessions where everybody breaks out into different sections, and everybody's coming up with the ideas, and they're debating on things that need to be built this quarter or this year. And in the sidelines, we have the software engineering teams that is listening to all these discussions back and forth. Folks making their points, and oftentimes the software engineering folks are asked to create quick prototypes. Just enough for us to be able to visualize what this might look like. And it could be as simple as something that on the board, on a whiteboard, we draw it up, and we draw some tabs and some pills and some lists, some tables, some graphs, right? And then we can talk about it and point at it and say, well, how about we move this here and there, right? It could be as simple as that, or it could be something on paper. Right, something that folks with cards and different color cards, they'll draw up, they'll cut it out with scissors, and folks with human computer interaction will expose it as different prototypes, and folks will say, well, no, I prefer this navigation, I prefer this layout and whatnot. So prototypes are very useful in that phase, right? Eliciting these requirements early on in the process. And these typically are throwaway prototypes, things that you build it once, you throw it away, and then only enough to understand what the requirements are, what you're going to actually build. Make sense? Now, some of these prototypes could be fairly sophisticated. It could be maybe a PowerPoint set of slides, yes, that are interactive, so that as you click, it actually navigates, and you can see what it would be like as if this were actually built, right? Some of them could be fairly photoshopped. To make them look very professional. Or even somebody might have lots of HTML widgets that they can whip up some pages real quick, right? So that you can actually see a web page that you can click and navigate through one of these pages. So the level of complexity of these prototypes is pretty relevant. Research shows that the sophistication of the prototype doesn't affect that much what the results of the overall project. But again, depend how far you want to take this. If you feel comfortable building something in HTML real quick, that's fine. If you prefer drawing something up on the screen and taking a snapshot with your phone and including those pictures in the document, that's fine as well. So create a horizontal prototype of at least 3 pages. One of them is for this particular use case. The administration personnel adds a new search criteria question. Meaning, right? These are the questions that clients need to fill out when they're looking or searching for providers. Right, system administrators need to be able to maintain these questions. Yes, so the system administrators probably they'll navigate to a particular service type or service category, and then they'll be able to see the list of all the services, select a particular service, and then they'll be able to see all the questions for that service, and they should be able to maybe delete a question or maybe have a plus button that adds a new question, right? Or maybe navigates to one of these questions and is able to change the title and maybe change the actual question. Yes? So it's asking you to implement 3 of these pages. One that lists the service types, right? Plumbing and electricity, cleaning, lawn, pets, all the different services, and then select a particular type, and then be able to and then see all the questions for that particular service provider type, right? So, for instance, if it's cleaning, the questions might be how big your house is, how many bedrooms, if you have pets, right? And then a form that would allow you to create a brand new question or edit an existing question. Make sense? All right, so create a horizontal prototype of those 3 things. All right, so that's up to that point. So 90 points there are for the requirements discovery phase of the project. It also gives you a chance to read through the project that we're going to be building throughout the semester. This is an individual assignment, so everyone will get a chance to read the same project statement. We're going to be adding to that project statement as we go through and talk about more requirements as we go. So expect changes, right? Additions, new requirements as well as changes to the requirements. So the last 10 points, is practicing some of the skills that we introduced last week. One of them is source control, right? Be able to use source control as a way to collaborate. But since we don't have teams yet, you don't have anyone to collaborate with. So you'll be collaborating with the TA, right? So what you're going to be asked to do is to do some coding, some Java coding, some really simple stuff. We're going to give you the code, but make sure that you are in a branch, that you create several commits as you create each one of the methods, as you create each one of the classes, as you make any changes, you commit each one of them, yes? Then you're going to create a pull request, and you're going to assign the pull request to one of the TAs. So this makes sure that you already have at least one of the TAs as a collaborator, yes? And the TA is going to look at your code. They're not going to make any comments, right? They're not going to make any comments. They're going to blindly merge your pull request. So make sure that your code actually works. And then they're going to merge it into master. And what you're going to do is then you're going to change to master and then pull the changes that the TA has merged into your own master branch. Make sense? Right? So you're going to practice this week, but going forward, once we have teams next week, right? You're expected to always work in a feature branch, never on master, right? And to always go through that long route, Right? Any changes that you make, you create a pull request, you assign it to one of your fellow team members, and they're going to read through your code, and if they merge your code, right, they're accepting the responsibility for that source code. Right? They're saying, I am making myself personally responsible for this code. Right? If this code breaks, I am willing to fix it. I'm willing to debug it. Yes. Well, no. So what we'll do next week when we have a team, we'll create a brand new repository that is for the team. Yes. And everybody will clone that repository and then work with their own local repositories. Yes. Thank you. So that's one of the skills that you're going to be practicing. The other skill is a topic that I will cover at the end of the lecture, which is web services. So last week we kind of hinted at this by doing a hello world controller, right? And that skill showed you that we can expose data. It was a simple string, yes. We can expose this data through a URL, some IP address, yes, mapped to some machine and some path on anywhere on the network, right, in the world, right? And that's an important skill to learn if you don't already. Probably you do. Being able to expose data and expose behavior and make it available so that any two processes can collaborate amongst each other and exchange data very easily through just using the HTTP protocol. All right. So this technique is referred to as a web service. You know, being able to expose a service, right, through the web. Right. So we'll talk about that a little further at the end of the lecture. Okay. And we give you the source code to use, so you don't have to come up with that. So at the end, the deliverable is that it will be the SRS document with all these sections filled out. There's many more sections that we're not even going to touch. We'll come back to this later in the upcoming weeks, in the upcoming sprints. We'll fill out some of these more. We'll revisit some of these and add more functional requirements, more non-functional, and we'll add more use cases. So this is use cases. Also provide a link to the branch that you created on Git, and also the pull request that you created and assigned to a TA. Make sense? Everybody good? Any questions?